A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
My Weird Prompts is a community-driven initiative exploring how AI can fuel curiosity and uncover the fascinating ways our world works. GPU compute for this podcast is generously provided by Modal. Learn more at modal.com.
You know, for years we've heard these grandiose, almost mythical claims from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps about their underground missile cities. They talk about these facilities as if they are impenetrable fortresses carved into the very bones of the earth, 500 meters down, where no bomb could ever reach them. But as we sit here on March 23rd, 2026, the reality on the ground in Operation Epic Fury tells a very different story. Today's prompt from Daniel is about these Iranian missile cities, specifically that 500-meter depth claim, the technical reality of digging that deep into the crust, and whether these sites are actually the deepest of their kind.
It is a fascinating prompt, Korn. Herman Poppleberry here, and I have been poring over the technical specifications, the geological data, and the recent intelligence briefings coming out of Central Command. Daniel is asking the million-dollar question, is this actually the deepest bunker of its kind? And what are the physical limits of building that far down? Because while 500 meters sounds like a lot to the average person, the strategic value of that depth is changing rapidly under the pressure of current military operations. We are seeing a fundamental shift in how we think about subterranean warfare.
It really feels like the myth of the invulnerable bunker is being dismantled in real time. We have seen over 4,700 strikes against Iranian missile infrastructure since late February. That is a staggering number of sorties. If these places were truly invulnerable, you would think the Revolutionary Guard would still be operating at full capacity, or at least putting up a more robust defense. Instead, their launch capability has cratered by 86% in less than a month. So Herman, let's start with that 500-meter claim. How does that actually stack up against other famous deep sites? Is it the record holder?
Not even close. Korn, though it is certainly deep for a functional military facility. To give some perspective, the United States Cheyenne Mountain complex in Colorado is buried under about 600 meters of solid granite. So, if the Iranian claim of 500 meters is accurate, they are in the same ballpark as one of the most famous hardened sites in history, but they are still playing second fiddle to a Cold War relic. However, it is not the deepest thing humans have ever built or even proposed. Back in the 1960s, the United States actually looked into something called the Deep Underground Command Center, or DUCC. That project was eyeing depths of 900 to 1,200 meters. They wanted to put a command center so deep that even a direct hit from a multi-megaton nuclear weapon would not collapse the structure.
900 to 1,200 meters. That is nearly 3/4 of a mile underground. Why did we never actually build that? It sounds like the ultimate prepper basement for the Pentagon.
Cost, logistics, and the sheer physics of the Earth, Korn. When you start talking about going beyond 500 or 600 meters, you stop fighting just the enemy and you start fighting the Earth itself. The technical hurdles become exponential rather than linear. For one, you have the lithostatic pressure. The weight of the rock above you is immense. At those depths, the rock doesn't just sit there, it wants to close any hole you make. It behaves almost like a slow-moving fluid over time. Then you have the geothermal gradient. On average, the temperature of the Earth increases by about 25 degrees Celsius for every kilometer you go down. If you are a kilometer deep, you are dealing with ambient rock temperatures that are significantly higher than the surface. You have to spend a fortune just on massive industrial cooling and ventilation systems just to keep the people inside from roasting, let alone the sensitive electronics of a ballistic missile.
So, General Hajizadeh and the Revolutionary Guard are bragging about 500 meters because it sounds terrifying to the uninitiated. But you are saying that going much deeper starts to become a suicide mission for the budget and the engineers. It is a classic case of diminishing returns.
Iranian propaganda, especially the stuff coming from the aerospace force, loves the 500-meter number because it creates this aura of invincibility. They want the world to believe that their missiles are sitting in a safe zone where they can be rolled out, fired, and rolled back in before anyone can react. But intelligence assessments from the United States and Israel, especially the ones we have seen from Major General Shlomi Binder recently, suggest that while the bunkers themselves might be deep, that very depth is actually becoming a massive strategic liability.
That is the paradox, isn't it? The deeper you bury your toys, the harder it is to get them out to play. We actually touched on this back in episode 1459, when we talked about the paradox of missile cities. If you have a massive tunnel network 500 meters down, you still need an exit. You need a ramp that leads to the surface. And those ramps are static. They do not move. They are fixed coordinates in a world of precision-guided munitions.
And that is exactly where the strategy of entombment comes in. This is the big shift we have seen in Operation Epic Fury. In previous decades, the goal of a bunker buster was to penetrate the roof and destroy the contents. You wanted to kill the missile. But the current coalition strategy under Admiral Brad Cooper has shifted toward what we call exit denial. You do not need to punch through 500 meters of rock to neutralize a missile city. You just need to drop a GBU-72/B or a massive ordnance penetrator right on the mouth of the tunnel.
It is like plugging the gopher hole with concrete. You do not need to catch the gopher, you just make sure he can never leave. I find it cheeky that the Revolutionary Guard spent decades and billions of dollars digging these deep holes, only for the coalition to realize that the deeper the hole, the easier it is to trap the occupant. If you have a 500-meter ramp, and I collapse the top 50 meters of it, you are not digging your way out with a shovel anytime soon. You are effectively buried alive in a billion-dollar tomb.
The logistics of clearing a collapsed tunnel entrance while under persistent drone surveillance are a nightmare. This explains the 86% drop in launch capability that Central Command reported on March 5th. The missiles are still there. The launchers are probably mostly intact. But they are entombed. They are essentially high-tech fossils at this point. The fixed nature of these sites is their undoing. In modern warfare, mobility is the only real defense. If you are static, you are a target. If you are deep and static, you are a tomb with a very high electricity bill.
Daniel also asked about how much further it is technically possible to dig. We know about the Kola super deep borehole, which went down over 12 kilometers. Why can't we just build a missile city at 5 kilometers? If 500 meters is good, wouldn't 5,000 meters be 10 times better?
The Kola borehole is a great example of the difference between a hole and a habitat, corn. Kola was just a few inches wide. It was a scientific straw poked into the earth. When you are talking about a missile city, you are talking about massive caverns, high-ceiling tunnels for transport trucks, living quarters, and fuel storage. At 5 kilometers deep, the rock behaves more like plastic than a solid. The pressure is so immense that the walls would literally float inward to fill the void. To keep a cavern open at that depth, you would need structural reinforcement that exceeds our current material science capabilities for something of that scale. You would be trying to hold back the weight of a mountain range with concrete and steel.
Not to mention the heat. At 5 kilometers, you are looking at temperatures well over 100 degrees Celsius. You would be trying to run a military base inside a literal oven. The air conditioning requirements alone would be enough to power a small city.
It is just not functional. Most experts agree that for a military facility where people need to live and work, the practical limit is somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 meters. Beyond that, the life support costs and structural maintenance alone would bankrupt a medium-sized nation. The Iranians chose 500 meters because it is deep enough to survive a standard 1,000-pound bomb, but shallow enough that they could actually build it with their indigenous technology. But they did not account for the evolution of the bunker buster or the change in strategy from destruction to entombment.
Right, let's talk about the hardware. The GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrator, or the MOP. This thing is a beast. It is a 30,000-pound bomb. If the Iranians are at 500 meters, can the MOP actually reach them? Or is the coalition using something else to get the job done?
The MOP is designed to penetrate up to 60 meters of reinforced concrete or about 200 feet of earth. Now, if you are doing the math, 60 meters is not 500 meters. However, the coalition has been using a technique called skip bombing or successive strikes. Because of the incredible precision we have in 2026, you can drop one MOP to clear the overburden, then you drop another one in the exact same crater. Each strike peels back another layer of the mountain like an onion. We have seen reports of 3 or 4 bombs being put into the same hole with centimeter-level accuracy.
It is like a high-velocity jackhammer. But even then, digging through 500 meters of mountain with bombs seems like the hard way to do it. It is expensive and time-consuming.
It is the hard way. That is why the entombment strategy is the gold standard right now. Why waste 4 MOPs trying to hit a room 500 meters down when one GBU-72 can collapse the access tunnel and achieve the same strategic result? The Iranian strategy was based on the idea that their missiles would be a persistent threat that could survive an initial strike. They thought they could wait us out. But persistent surveillance from high-altitude long-endurance drones, or HALE drones, means we know exactly where every exit is. The moment a tunnel door opens, it is tagged by a drone that has been loitering there for 48 hours.
It makes the whole missile city concept feel very 20th century. It is the Maginot Line, but vertical. We saw this desperation manifest on March 21st, just a couple of days ago, when Iran tried that strike on Diego Garcia. That was over 4,000 kilometers away. It showed they have the range, but it also felt like a last gasp. If your launch capability is down 86%, you start taking shots you never would have taken before. You are trying to prove you are still relevant.
That Diego Garcia attempt was a massive escalation, but it also highlighted the failure of the bunker strategy. Those missiles had to come from somewhere. Because so many of the primary missile cities have been entombed, the Revolutionary Guard is being forced to use smaller, less protected sites or even mobile launchers that they had kept in reserve. These are much easier for the coalition to pick off. The deep bunkers were supposed to be the backbone of their deterrent, the place where they could hide their most precious assets, but they have turned out to be a massive sunk cost, literally.
I wonder if General Hajizadeh is sitting in one of those bunkers right now, looking at the ceiling and wondering if the air filtration system is going to hold out. It is a grim thought. You build this massive underground empire to project power, and you end up just hiding in a very expensive basement while your military capability is dismantled above your head. It reminds me of our discussion in episode 1397 about the shift to mass production. They built for quantity and depth, but they forgot about the quality of the exits.
It really underscores the shift in military thinking. In the past, we thought of underground facilities as the ultimate safety, but in an era of persistent ISR and precision munitions, a bunker is just a fixed coordinate, and a fixed coordinate is a target. The Iranians fell into the trap of thinking that physical mass could defeat digital precision. They thought 500 meters of rock was an unbreakable shield, but they forgot that a shield you cannot see through or move is just a wall, and walls can be bypassed or buried.
So, to answer Daniel's second question, the intelligence assessments have definitely diverged from the Iranian propaganda. The IRGC says 500 meters equals invincibility. The coalition says 500 meters equals a static, vulnerable target that is easy to trap. It is a complete inversion of the intended strategic value. Major General Shlomi Binder was right when he said the Iranian military is in distress. Their command structures are exposed because they are tied to these massive, unmoving holes in the ground.
And for Daniel's third question about how much further we can dig, the answer is that we can go much deeper for science like the COLA project, but for war we have hit a functional floor. There is no point in going deeper if the enemy can just seal the door. The future of this kind of infrastructure is likely going to move away from depth and toward dispersion and camouflage, smaller, shallower, but much harder to find. If you can't be deep, you have to be invisible.
Like hiding a needle in a haystack instead of burying the needle under a mountain. It seems like the era of the massive subterranean missile city is ending with a whimper, or rather, the muffled sound of a tunnel entrance being buried under a few thousand tons of rubble. It is a tough lesson in the physics of modern warfare. You can run to the center of the earth, but you can't hide from a drone that never sleeps, and a bomb that can hit a postage stamp from 30,000 feet.
What I find truly wild is the sheer waste of resources. Think about the thousands of laborers, the millions of tons of concrete, the decades of clandestine digging. All of that effort is currently being neutralized by a relatively small number of munitions targeting the weak points of the system. It is an incredible return on investment for the coalition and a devastating loss for the Iranian regime. They bet the farm on these missile cities being their ultimate insurance policy, and the policy just got canceled because they didn't read the fine print about tunnel exits.
It is a classic case of preparing for the last war. They built defenses against the types of strikes we saw in the 90s and the early 2000s. They did not prepare for a world where the goal is not to destroy the bunker, but to simply make it irrelevant. They are still holding the missiles, but they've lost the ability to use them.
That is a great way to put it. Irrelevance is a much cheaper and more effective military objective than total destruction. If a missile is 500 meters underground and it can never be moved to a launch position, it is functionally no different than if it never existed at all. In fact, it is worse for the owner because they are still paying the electricity bill and the salaries for the guards to keep the lights on in the tunnel. It is a drain on resources that provides zero strategic value.
Well, I think we have thoroughly explored the depths of this one, pun intended. The practical takeaways here are pretty clear for anyone watching geopolitical developments. First, depth is a vanity metric in 2026. If you hear a country bragging about how deep their bunkers are, they are likely trying to compensate for a lack of mobility or advanced technology. Second, the entombment doctrine is the new standard. Watch for how exit denial is used in future conflicts. It is the most efficient way to handle deep earth facilities.
And finally, keep an eye on the shift from static to mobile defenses. The failure of the Iranian missile cities is going to be studied in military academies for decades. It is the definitive proof that being hard to kill is not the same thing as being effective. If you are trapped in a hole, you might be safe, but you are also useless. The goal of a weapon is to be used, not to be preserved in a mountain like a museum piece.
That is a sharp point to end on. Thanks as always to our producer, Hilbert Flemingtop, for keeping the show running smoothly while we dive into these deep topics. And a big thanks to Modal for providing the GPU credits that power this show and allow us to process all this data in real time.
This has been My Weird Prompts. If you are enjoying our deep dives into the technical and the tactical, a quick review on your favorite podcast app really helps us reach more people who are interested in the intersection of technology and strategy.
We will be back soon with another prompt from Daniel. Until then, keep your head up and maybe stay out of deep holes. They aren't as safe as they used to be.
Goodbye, everyone.
See ya.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird Prompts, where our thoughts go from slow takes to facts on cue. We change and follow through. My Weird Prompts, that's the flows from sloth, from man, from long-eared host. My Weird Prompts, until next time, stay curious, keep